Okay, greetings, brothers and sisters. My wife said that I am not pronouncing these things correctly, which I knew this. I knew this what I wasn't. Again, I'm not recommending these things, but I've been asked numerous questions about these items. So this is nano hypoxatrate toothpaste, and um, the one we have been using is this one called Boca, right here, fluoride-free toothpaste. And what it's supposed to be is 98 or 99% identical to the material that's in your teeth. And it's supposed to, your teeth are supposed to reabsorb this. And I'm not making any claims here. I don't recommend anything. Let's be clear about that. I'm not recommending or endorsing anything. I don't have any relationship with any of these types of products. But I've had a good. Well, this is the other thing I got at Costco. Sonicare Diamond Clean Connect rechargeable electric toothbrush. So the story was, I had been working to. I was having issues with my teeth, particularly my gum issue. The There was I was having trouble with plaque, and they had done these deep cleans. I had them done like 4 years ago, and then I had them done again, where they did deep clean, like on the right at the base of my tooth, between the gum and the tooth, and the plaque was making it hard for the gums to grow back. And they measure your gums. It's a whole thing, right? And I ended up getting a couple cavities, and the guy said, the dentist was like, "Are you drinking are you eating like lemons or something?" I said, "Well, I'm taking lemon juice in the morning." He said, "Well, that actually softens your enamel." And so I got two cavities and two potential cavities. And so I was looking at the cavities, and I started using this toothpaste, and then we bought these toothbrushes. And these toothbrushes, we had the lower end Sonicare, and I thought that was good enough. But my wife needed a new toothbrush. We went to Costco, and there's only like $10 or $15 difference between this Diamond Clean one and the regular one. And you get two toothbrushes, but they're regularly almost $300. And I'm like, well, how much Sonicare do you need? But we got these toothbrushes, and it was like night and day, like the amount of plaque they took off. And so I started using this new toothbrush, and we started using this nano hypoxatrate, which my wife found on Reddit. Um, and I went to the dentist, and I could see the cavity wasn't getting worse. I could see two cavities, and they weren't getting worse, and the two potential cavities got better. And so, then the fact they couldn't even find them, um, and so I was very happy. And then the dental assistant had this one particular dental assistant had told me how to brush my teeth differently, and she also was using that new toothbrush. And she said, "Yeah, those toothbrushes are amazing." And she went to measure my gums, and there had been substantial improvement. There was just no. I was getting rid of all that plaque that between the gum line and my teeth, and the gums were able to sort of like grow back. And it's like 6 is really bad. Like if you got a measurement of a 6, and the sixes went back down to 4 or 3, and the 4 and 3s went down to 1 or 2. Like everything was better. And so, again, I don't recommend anything, but based on that one appointment and just how I feel in general, I feel good about this toothpaste. And like fact that two of the potential cavities disappeared, right? And so, there's that. The other thing is I talked about DSMO. Um, this is the stuff on Amazon. We've purchased this one here. It's supposed to be in a glass bottle and pharma grade. We've been using it differently. We've been adding water. It like ends up kind of stinging. Um, my wife and I have felt like we've had some aches and pains that have gone away, and I felt like there's other health benefits I'm receiving from it. We're just applying it to our skin again. I'm not recommending anything. We're in the initial stages. We've been doing it about 3 weeks or so, but we've been diluting it with reverse osmosis water, and and applying it that way. it just stings too much if you put it on full strength. It was getting to be like painful, and we apply it usually with castor oil. We got one of these things here. I think it might have been this one. That's it's in a gel form, would make it easier to apply, but it burns. It was really bad. Like it goes on and it really stings. And so again, I'm not recommending anything, but we have had pretty good results with this in terms of it seems to relieve various types of I don't know, like I had a shoulder that was getting better anyway, and it definitely I think it helped that shoulder and some other things like back issues or whatever. It's supposed to do other things, and I don't know. There's a lot of things that have these miracle claims, and I have not found them to be true. A lot of these alternative medicines, but the more subtle ones, I think I tend to believe in. But if people are going to do any of these things, don't take my word for it. You should do your own research, and it might work differently for you than it does for me, or whatever it is, right? Like I don't recommend things for that reason. I'm not a healthcare person. Anything that I say here is, I take everything kind of lightly and as a joke, and there's no seriousness to what I'm saying. In the sense that I think that everything on planet Earth is illusionary. I work to remember that. It's my general sort of overall feeling. Well, let me switch over to voiceover. I want to talk about that just briefly here. Okay, so I must have slept late. It's already almost 11 o'clock, and I just ate breakfast around 10:30. Usually I eat like at 9. So I woke up, and my wife had gone to work, and I looked out, and the snow. We had snow. Like last night, I brought the dogs out. I bring the dogs out around 10:30, 11 o'clock, and we're starting to hear coyote activity. So, I always go out with them just in case. It's different when we have chickens in the yard because the coyotes would probably just scoop up one of our chickens. We don't get much coyote in the yard. We get a lot around the perimeter of our property at night. Anyways, I opened the blinds and it was snowing. And last night I thought I saw a few snowflakes. It's been in like the 60s. As of like yesterday, day before yesterday, it was really warm, and then it started getting cold. But not like snow cold. But I woke up and I saw the snow, and it's the first snow of the year. And like I like winter. It's my least favorite season. Not because I don't like it. It's just that it goes on too long, and I can do like 6 months of summer and 6 months of spring or fall, but not 4 months of winter. But the first snow is that's just a beautiful thing, right? Like the miracle of snow. You have this frozen water that just falls from the sky. Of course, the rain cycle. The fact that there's evaporation from big water bodies that turn into clouds, and those clouds move around and drop water at different places, and then you can grow. Things can live because of that, right? Instead of having just big water bodies and no rain. Like imagine not having any rain. Of course, snow. Where there's these mountaintops that have snow and it accumulates over the winter, and then melts during the spring, and then it feeds all these rivers and creeks and all this life and all these things, right? The water that disseminates and melts into the earth, and some of it makes it to creeks and streams and springs. Springs are a wonderful thing, right? My family and I went to a spring in Florida not that long ago, and just I'll put a picture up from that, and the water was so freaking clear, and we were kayaking over it. It was like amazing, right? They have these springs in Florida. Why even in Florida would you have springs? Like spring water and these things. This water that's been purified and mineralized through going through these sources. Some of the spring water is just amazing water, like all this vibrance and life in it, right? This water cycle, that years ago, right before my family went through what we went through, it's sort of the dissolution of the family, right? Like the end of the Fellowship of the Ring, like where the fellowship breaks up, kind of thing. We went camping right before we went to India. We went on an extensive camping trip, And we were ended up in North Carolina. We had been in Virginia. We ended up in North Carolina. And the first place we went to were the Pisgah Mountains. And beautiful place. And we walked to a place where there was like waterfalls. And amazing like waterfalls that were people were swimming in the pond. It was crazy. Like it was this place. But we went there to camp and it was like June, like it was, into the summer, and it got down to like 40 degrees and it rained, and it was like torrential rains. And my youngest son was he had a hammock. We got these big giant tent with like multiple rooms for the kids, and he decided he wanted to try. We had this hammock as well, and he set up this hammock, and it was pouring. I'm like, I hope he went into the tent. I mean, he must have went into the tent, right? Because it was pouring so hard. But I came out the next morning, and he had like a carabiner, like he had a carabiner on him and some paracord, and he made we had multiple tarps, and he took a tarp and put it over it, and it was completely dry. But our campsite was soaked. The water was like just there, like there was an inch of water on the ground, puddles everywhere, deeper puddles, and we could see our breath. It was condensed. It was like in June. And it was like a weird way to start off our camping trip. But we ended up unintentionally, and the kids were being homeschooled, followed the water cycle, and the water was coming in from this Pisgah Mountains and down through these various places in North Carolina, and then went down to where we ended up camping. We followed the water cycle going down to the ocean. There's this big river that would come out. It was like probably a mile across. You could barely see across it, and the water was flowing into the ocean, right? Where there's of course some barrier islands there in the intercoastal, but this was a freshwater river, and we camped all along these places where there's water, and eventually we made it to the ocean. And it was kind of interesting in different ways, and it was, like I said, unintentional, but it became like a good homeschooling lesson. And the water cycle, which is it's a metaphor for one's spiritual journey, where you're taken out of the divine ocean, and you are a drop of water. You end up in a cloud, and you end up going into being rained, and then hopefully you make it to a creek or a stream or something like this, and a river, and then eventually back to the source, right? Of course, some drops of water don't make it all the way. They get sucked up by trees or grass and plants, and they don't make it into one of these, like whatever it is. But this is the idea behind the spiritual journey, where you come from the source, and then you go out and have these experiences, and eventually you merge back into the source. And so, going back to what I was saying, the opening introduction with these things with the nanohypoxytrate and the DMSO or whatever it is, and these other things. I think of everything as a joke, because when I first started the Sajmark system, the meditation that I do, you get these introductory sittings. You get these 3 introductory sittings, and they're to clean out anything that's blocking your ability to have the spiritual light, the light of your soul, like enhanced, I guess would be a good way of saying it. And so there needs to be some cleaning. Usually takes 3 individual sittings, meditations of having your heart cleaned on 3 consecutive days. But it can take up as many as 20 for some people who have more stuff to clean out, right? And when I went to this guy's house, the preceptor told me about it. It was pouring rain. It was in August in Massachusetts. And like I was stepping in puddles of the water was like raining so hard, it was like flooded, like there was floods basically. And I, was walking into this guy's house, and the parking lot had like an inch of water, and like the drainage system couldn't keep up with the intensity of water. And it rained all 3 days, and of course now, years later, I understood that was a sign of like divine grace falling. Like there was there's a connection between rain and this divine energy. Like it's enhanced at times when there's rain. Like just, the rain has nothing, sense to do with it, because it's not on the physical plane, but it's a sign of something, right? It's the two things like go together. And the guy told me how to do the meditation, and I was like, all right. I tried meditating before. I'd done some yoga to enhance my athletic ability playing basketball and things. And I, tried to meditate. I didn't really like it. I just, wasn't into it. Kind of, I was restless, these things. And, but sometimes I get relaxed and I go to sleep or something, so it was whatever it was. But I didn't love it. But I was told about the system. My ex-girlfriend, she was a nurse, and she had these, issues she wanted to deal with, and she found a counselor that lived like a couple blocks away. And she was a person with a, degree in MSW, Master's in Social Work. And she had her own private practice, but she also was a medium who channeled, what she called spirit guides or whatever. And she was kind of good at it because I went to see her, and we both went individually to see this person. And I felt like she did a kind of good job. She did a good job as a counselor, but the counseling model is very limited. I have a master's degree in counseling now, so many years later. So that was back in 1993, and I was able to get my master's in counseling in 1990, 2000 maybe when I graduated. So it was like 7 years after that, and that was just, I had a lot of psychological psych courses and things that I took. And, I did 3 attempts to get my undergraduate. I dropped out of college twice and eventually, all these things. And so, because I was not really convinced I would make a good counselor, and it was true, because I was okay. I was good at some things, but not good at like the listening empathetically to people, as you might imagine. And so me and this girlfriend of mine back then broke up, and I moved to Massachusetts. She was in Connecticut. She moved down to the ocean. We were living kind of near Hartford, and then we moved, the central part of Connecticut, a small state. And I moved like an hour and a half up towards Northampton, where there was a number of these, preceptors, which I didn't know about then. It's kind of it's a 5 college area. There's a lot of this sort of new age spiritual stuff up there. And she moved down to the ocean. And, I felt kind of bummed, like the counseling process, because I felt like, I couldn't go back to my old life of like partying and hanging out with my friends, playing sports, kind of young adult male, college stuff. Like, the stuff that you do in college or whatever it is, or, when you're in your early 20s. And I couldn't go back to that. Like I was wanting to move on to something different. But I, was in the process of graduating. I finally went in my 3rd attempt at college, and, I was tired of waiting tables. I had waited tables for about 8 years, and, I was ready to move on, and I felt kind of stuck, and I didn't see a path forward. And so it had been 3 months since I had seen this counselor, and I went back to see her. It was kind of like our closing session. We didn't have like a thing where there's just like, a closing session. I felt like, I said, I can't go back to my old life, but my new life hasn't opened up. And it was a very frustrating session with her, like, because, and her spirit guides said, meditate, like you do the meditation. And I go, what the fuck are you talking about? Like, like I said, I didn't like meditating. And it made me kind of angry. And she gave me this, like a printout. So this is, my resistance to, as a person, I had no intention of doing what I'm doing now with the Sajmarg meditation. Like it wasn't, consciously a thing that I wanted. And I wasn't really thinking about God all that much or any of these things. And I wanted like, some sort of changes in my life, things to open up. And I wanted to enter that next phase. Like when you're in your early 20s, like we had a couple of different basketball. We had a YMCA basketball team, intramural basketball team in my 2nd attempt at college. And, teammates of mine would get a steady girlfriend and start settling down, and all of a sudden they disappear. Like they would come to the games and play in the games, but they wouldn't go out drinking afterwards. Like they wouldn't, you would just, and we'd start making fun of them for being whooped, right? You're whooped. You're whooped. Like one of my friends used to say it like that, he used to say stuff like that, in that tone of voice. And so, they just started disappearing and matriculating into their adult lives, graduating college, these things, right? And you wouldn't see these guys anymore. They no longer hanging out because they had moved into, family situations and whatever. And, real jobs, even if it wasn't like they got married, they ended up having a real job. And, it was like completely different scheduling and things. And so, you just see all these people disappearing into a new phase of life. And, I was still kind of stuck doing the same stuff. And I wanted something different. I wanted to, like, become like an adult or whatever. I was 28, like, at that point. And so she said, she gave me this piece of paper, and I was like, it just irritated me. And so I came home and I had like a desk. I was living in this loft apartment. And I put it on the desk. And I didn't think about it for like 3 months. It just sat there. And then one day I picked it up and it said something about meditating on the heart. And when I did, I felt all these vibrations like in my heart. Like before I started reading it, like I felt when I picked up the piece of paper and I felt there was like this energy in it. And I'm like, well, maybe this thing is good, So I called the guy and he was like two blocks away from me. Like he was 5 minutes away. Like I could almost walk to his like apartment, like a condo. And I came in and he was like, didn't think I was going to start, but I said, no, I definitely want to start. And, like I said, it was raining out. He thought I just wanted to hear about it or talk about it. But I was like, no, I want to try it. And he told me what to do, and I'm meditating, and I'm just not really good at meditating. Like now, like I've gotten better just from years of doing it. But certainly, I wasn't like built for it. Like my brother's even more restless than me, and he doesn't feel the transmission, and like just, I mean, he's just, kind of a tortured soul when he meditates. A lot of, you can see he's like having a lot of thoughts and like he's stressed face or whatever. So like, I don't know if it's a part of my, genetic makeup or my family. And so when I started doing it, I'm like, and I was okay, but, I was trying to do what the instructions were. And so, nothing, it was just like any other time I'd meditated. It was like, yeah, okay, whatever. I didn't feel anything. And then like probably a couple minutes before the end, it felt like a hand reached down, like into my mouth and into my throat and was pulling something out, like something that didn't want to go. And, like it was a strong experience. It was like kind of like fucked up. I was like, I was having trouble breathing. And like there was tension like in my jaw and all these things. And then like something was like solid, almost like solid was pulled out. And I felt this immediate relief and lightness, like just unbelievably light and great, and just this deep sense of like just well-being. And this was my first experience with the transmission, the Sajmark system. And this idea that, and then this happened, all three sittings at the end of it. And like the first one, I was like, wow. And this guy, Fred, who's kind of a, boomer hippie. And he had been to India a lot, spent a lot of time with the second master of the system, Babaji, and then Charji, who is now the master of the system. And he had been a great preceptor, but he hadn't had a lot of experiences. And he didn't experience what I did. Like he had no idea, but he saw like something happen for me. Like he was always, aware that like when he saw something, like, there was, the two of us experienced it. Like no, everyone else could, I mean, they just have to take my word for it or not, right? Like it's a personal experience. And, but he was there, like, and so he knew that, like, something special had happened for me, right? And like I just, in the third sitting, I laughed, like this deep laugh, like I just felt this joy. And it was this idea that life was a joke, that everything that we think is important and all these things that we're doing in material life is a joke, and that there's a real purpose to our life, and it's, a spiritual purpose. And, the joke doesn't sound funny when you tell it, but how I felt about it, like I had this deep laugh that like came from my soul, like the end of the city. This deep sense of like, almost irony, divine irony. And, it was just a wonderful experience. And I've, been a much lighter person since then. And, I've had these experiences that, are similar to that, like in the sense that enhance that original experience, that our material life is, not at all important. Like, we get upset about things and we buy into the illusion. I've told that story so much about, there's the soul of Krishna, the Vishnu, the essence of the divine being that's in charge of preservation, right? Shiva is destruction, and Brahma is creation. In everything, there's creation, preservation, maintenance, and destruction. Like everything has those three phases in it. Everything, is created and then is preserved and then it's destroyed. And so Vishnu comes down, and the soul that they refer to in Hinduism, but it's not a Hindu thing. This is not like, well, that's Hinduism, I don't believe it. It's either real or it isn't, right? And there is creation, destruction, and preservation in everything. And so they've just been able to, identify this. And just because it isn't in your religion, if you're a Christian, I mean, it is in there, but it's just not, named. But, there's all these souls are part of the same team, whether it's Jesus or Krishna or Buddha or any of these, Buddha's a little bit different. But any higher developed soul that comes down here, any saint, any higher developed soul, has often been a part of all these religions in past existences, right? They've been a part of this movement because they're assigned to elevate the masses, elevate everybody else to a higher level of spiritual attainment. That's their task, and they come down in different phases. And the same group of souls that come down when Jesus was alive, the same group of souls came down, during the Mahabharata or some of these other, things that we don't even know about. But they keep on incarnating, working to help humanity, and it's just a fucking chore, right? It's any higher developed soul has a risk of being pulled down to a lower level, and many of them do. And most of them do because it's just so fucked up here, right? And it's the illusion. It's just so enticing, right? Whether it's the pain and suffering or the joy and pleasures, it's the illusion. It only takes a week for people to go into Stockholm syndrome. And so you have these souls that end up higher developed souls that develop some form of Stockholm syndrome, and they get pulled into the bullshit and the drama, and they forget why they're here, even after some spiritual attainment. It's a sad thing, but instead of these higher developed souls pulling the people up, the higher developed souls get pulled down, which is like, kind of counterproductive, right? So, but there is these twin souls. One's the ego, which is Nara. This Vishnu being has these two different essences that comes down to earth and observes things, right? And in soul form. And Nara is the ego, and Narayana is the soul part. And they're like out in the desert, and Nara says, "What's illusion? What's Maya?" And Narayana, so I'll tell you in a second, but I'm thirsty. Go get me some water. So Nara goes to get some water, and while he's there, he sees this farm. He walks over and talks to the people, and there's this beautiful daughter, beautiful girl, like just amazingly beautiful. He like immediately falls in love with her. He's completely forgotten about Narayana, the water, and all this. And he talks to the farmer. Farmer's like, "Yeah, there's nobody around here. Husband for my daughter," and she's like into him. They get married, and they're like instant love, and they start having kids, and they're at this farm, and like life is just blissful. And then it starts to rain, and it rains like flooding, and the farm, everything gets washed away, and everybody else dies in the flood. And Nara's just sitting there, and he's like holding onto a log, weeping and just miserable. And he washes up on shore where he originally was to get the water for Narayana. And he sees Narayana, and he goes, "Oh my God, it's been like, it's like been like 20 years. And he goes, "It's horrible." He tells him everything that happened. And Narayana says, "You only been gone for 30 seconds. That was Maya. Where's my water?" Right? So there's the illusion that we get sucked into, right? And I often talk about this as a show, but think about the TV shows that people get into, where people are watching something that's really enticing, and they think about it, like they're talking about, and they have groups of people talking about it, the Marvel movies and what's going to happen in Avengers 3, and they go to these Comic-Con things, and they dress up like the characters, and I saw, I don't know if it was a T-shirt it must have been the T-shirt that's being sold that said, "I'm tall for a hobbit," right? My wife and I were driving, and there was a car, and it, how the car has the family stickers. It'll show a man and a woman, three kids, and a dog, like some kind of thing, right, on the back of the car. But they had this. They were like all Star Wars figures, right? Like they were like little Jedi's. People get obsessed with these things. They're living some kind of illusionary life where they think about and act, and they do this LARPing and things, and whatever it is, Civil War reenactments or LARPing, to be characters, and Dungeons and Dragons, and they get into the illusion, and of course video games now, and so illusions within illusions, right? People get into all that stuff, and get egotistical about hurt feelings, and they get pissed off when the writers, like all the people that went ballistic when Lost, the last episode of Lost or whatever it was. And I guess I wasn't watching the show. I watched a little of the show, and then I'm like, it just is a never ending. Like it's a trickery to like every time on Lost, they would resolve one thing, they would come up with more unresolved things, and so it became like silly, like just like they're constantly keeping you in a state of being unresolved. There's certain personality disorders, the borderline personality disorder, that they can't resolve stories. One of the ways that you diagnose somebody with borderline personality is they have this thing called the thematic aptitude test, the TAT, I think it's called, and it's just a bunch of pictures, dramatic pictures, and you ask somebody to tell you a story. And people with borderline personality can't resolve something. They can't bring it to an end, right? It's always like an open-ended question. And that's what they did with Lost and these other shows, where they would keep things unresolved. Everything's a cliffhanger. And there's people that you live in your life that are like that they are constantly keeping things like without just being settled. And it unsettles you, right? There was this, when I started the meditation years ago, I lived in a shared house. And there was a guy there that he was kind of a new age guy. He was like getting his life together. I guess he had some drug issues, but he was managing a gas station. He hooked up with this woman who was like a professor at Smith College, and she was a single mom. And the guy who ran the house did these things. He was called the gamesman, and he walked on stilts, and he was like a child performer. And he had all these games. He had all these things, and one time we all played, some sort of game together. And it was getting late, and we didn't finish the game. And like he said, the next morning, he went, "How did everyone sleep?" And he said, everyone was like, "Well, we slept badly." He goes, "Yeah, because when you play a game and you don't resolve it, like you'll play it in your dreams. Like it's just something you have to like finish up, like things that are unresolved." And people experience this in their lives, right? People want some resolution. So that's what they withhold resolution. They do it in politics. They do it, and every level of entertainment. They want to keep things where you're anticipating something, right? You want the end of it. You want to bring it to a close, right? There's, every season of sports, every season of TV shows, there's a story, and like at the end, it's supposed to resolve itself. But like they do these cliffhangers where something is unresolved, so you have to tune into the next season. Like they did this with the show Dallas when I was a kid. Who shot JR, right? This character named JR, and became like everyone's speculating over the whole summer, waiting for September to watch the first episode to see who shot the guy. Like I was kind of a kid, I think, when it happened, so I didn't give a shit, but it was a big deal. And so, all these things that I'm saying. And, very recently, so I was on Facebook, I think. I was on Facebook. And somebody who I'm 90% sure, no, I'm like 100% sure, like I don't know this person is like an older woman that was friends with me because they were truthers, right? This person's a truther. And, I don't go on Facebook, and so I don't remember people. Like there's times I'm like, who is this person? Right? And people don't post on Facebook very much. But this person posted, there's someone who's, related to the truth community about how HBO finally took off that horrible, in their perspective, horrible documentary that slandered Michael Jackson, right? And that Michael Jackson wasn't a pedo. And, that could be true, but probably not. because Michael Jackson would have kids sleep over his house, and they would sleep in the same bed together. And there are two boys, one of whom who's a famous choreographer. These two adult men now were kids that slept over with him. And they had very graphic stories, not only of the sexual abuse, but they were like his boyfriend. Like they had a relationship. And they were like, 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, right? They were going on dates and stuff. And there was video of them being together. There was videos of these kids being with Michael Jackson. And they slept over his house. And they had two kids who, adult men now, both in, heterosexual men in relationships with women, that had a sexual relationship with Michael Jackson, according to their story. And they could have been lying, but they didn't sound like they were lying. And a lot of the things that they said were verifiable, right? Because they were sleeping over his house and these other things. And there's other kids came forward, 4 or 5 of them, and Michael Jackson paid off all these people, lots of them. He paid them off with settlements and things. And, to say it's like a slam dunk that he wasn't that, when he was so weird, and he was like a kid who was obviously abused, talked about his own abuse from his dad, if he was very effeminized, he had that girl-like voice, the bleached skin, the plastic surgeries, building an amusement park where he lived, and having very weird relationships with kids, most of them boys, and these sleepovers and things where they'd sleep in the same bed. And then defending it in these interviews. And so the evidence is fucking overwhelming that at the very least it was inappropriate. It's inappropriate for an adult man to have boys sleep over his house and sleep in the same bed. Like everyone can establish that as a fucking borderline, as a boundary line, that you shouldn't do that. And somebody who wants to do that is weird as fuck. Like a grown 25-year-old man who wants to, like instead of having relationships with women, like with having like a marriage and a girlfriend, somebody who's very famous and has the ability to, having so many different women would want to be with him, that instead he'd rather have sleepovers with boys. Like there's, something fucked up there, right? Like if it's just that, right? Like if a grown man's, if you're a parent, and they say to you, any parent, and some grown man, a 25-year-old man, wants to have a sleepover with your son, what would you say? No, get the fuck out of here, right? You'd be like, what are you talking about? Like, if some grown 25-year-old man said, hey, why don't you have your son sleep over with me and we'll sleep in the same bed? You would say no, but since it was Michael Jackson, these parents couldn't wait to pimp their kids out. And, he would buy off the parents. Like he would go and he would groom the parents and treat them a certain way. And they loved the celebrity of it. And the kid was, doing fun things with Michael Jackson. And so he had this system where he would convince these parents that this was a good thing. This was natural and normal, and it fucking wasn't, right? I'm saying this because you think about all the evidence that's there, that goes against Michael Jackson. Like, if he was not a pedo, which, I guess there's possibility of that, there's no way that, he can explain away all these things. And so people who are like, this woman was writing, and I think it was a link to some other thing. It was like some people were celebrating this, Michael Jackson fans. And whatever it was, I just looked at it briefly because I was like, oh, this is fucked up. And I didn't invest in it. But their point of view was that Michael Jackson was a scapegoat. He was a wonderful person, saint-like person, innocent and all these things that like people think about him. And he was demonized. But, they think everybody else is a pedo, like with much less information, like less, evidence, like Jeffrey Epstein and all these people, right? It's like the people who look at Bill Clinton and go, oh my God, he was friends with Jeffrey Epstein. And then they look at Donald Trump and go, yeah, they barely knew each other. And, he kicked him out of Mar-a-Lago because he was a pedo. And I'm like, well, no, that's just what you've been told, because he actually, in a quote, he said Jeffrey Epstein liked girls young, right? And that he said he liked to party and that they were good friends and he was a wonderful guy. And so it's just, the illusion, right? This is what I'm talking about, the illusion, the way people deceive themselves. And people think they know things when they don't. And there's nothing to know here because it's an illusion in itself. The physical life and physical reality is an illusion, right? It's a temporary situation where you inhabit a body for, in terms of the life of your soul, which is around for, trillions upon trillions of years, whatever it's been created at the beginning of the universe. And so, the universe has already existed for so long, and your soul has existed in various forms, whether physical or spiritual, for, billions of trillions of years, whatever the length of the universe is now. I think we're less than halfway through it, so there's more time to go. And that you have this life of your soul, and 100 years is, a way that your soul doesn't exist in the linear aspect of time, the fourth dimension of time even. So, like your soul when it's not in a body. And so this little blip of an illusionary life is nothing in terms of your soul's, whatever. So I'm saying all this because it's just illusionary. And it's just a joke. All these things that we think are so serious and all the things we stress about, and I get sucked into it just like everybody else does. I mean, in different ways because I've had these experiences, and I just have to remind myself that, yeah, it doesn't important. Why are you getting upset by something that's fucking fake, right? That's, so, why am I getting upset or butthurt about something that's, doesn't even really exist, right? It's illusionary. And so I come back to that all the time. And so when I say anything here, in terms of healthcare or any of these things, or any of my opinions about anything, they don't matter. It's, I guess this one more than any other one matters because it's closer to the truth. It's, we're here and we have to participate. We can't be completely aloof and completely, withdrawn. We have physical bodies and we're here. We're in it. We're in this thing. We have this experience. We're seeing things. We're reacting. And we should, enjoy the things we're supposed to enjoy and suffer the things we suffer. But, there also has to be an understanding that it is illusionary and there's a higher purpose. And it's like having that balance. And most people are just so, beat down by the illusion, that their essence of their soul is so diminished that they're basically bankrupt. That's what you see. Or so sucked into the thing that they are so disconnected from anything that's resembles their spiritual purpose and their soul's path that they can't even, imagine such a thing. But again, make this title of the video, why you're getting upset about something that's so fake. And I think that this is, one of my key, ideas here. That's why apocalypse, right? It's, we're going to suffer. Things are going to go a certain way. Our lifestyles are going to change. Things are going to be different. And we have to adapt to it, which is difficult. And, all of it. Anyways, let's get into the other stuff. I want to start off, I think, with this thing. Let's see what I have here. Okay, so I was going to lean towards something disturbing and kind of funny. Definitely funny. I saw this boner pill commercial on one of the sports. I was watching either basketball or football. And they had this commercial that's clearly aimed at young people, and it's so effed up. And I already did a clip of it. I was going to lead with that, right? There's, times I make these little clips here with using the screen flow where I'm grabbing the screen. I'm doing a screen capture video clips. And usually I do them in order as I make them, right? That just makes it easier for me. I haven't taken any classes or training on editing videos. And, I know how to create a story and I know how to frame narratives and, but I'm not trained in any way. And what's easiest for me is just to do them in order. But this is just breaking now. Two big things with Trump's disastrous picks here, because these are, huge swings and a miss. First, this with Matt Gaetz.
However, we do have some breaking news to let you know about, and this is the breaking news right here. We have learned that Matt Gaetz has withdrawn his nomination for Attorney General. He sent out this social media post just moments ago saying, "I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday. I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it is clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of the Trump Vance." And so,
Yeah, so you had something on you, and you weren't going to be confirmed. I was listening to a video yesterday, and I don't know what I was doing, but I put my phone down, and it went into an autoplay of something else. And there was some guy being really obnoxious. It was like a court hearing. I thought it was like local government. I didn't know it was not local government, but like a state government or something like that. But there was an annoying, obnoxious person in their voice, very accusatory. It was like, "Who's this punk?" Right? And I looked at my phone. It was Matt Gaetz, and I'm like, "Oh my god, this guy's horrible." Like he was just being disrespectful and just he's just like a punk. Like this, if he's a punk, right? And so it's not a surprise that he's having to do this, but this is bad news for Trump. So there was I was watching the news and I came in front of snowing and I was doing some work outside. The dogs, my one dog is very hesitant, like he doesn't like rain, buddy. And Tulsi is like just happy about everything, so she was like psyched about the snow. Farley used to love the snow. Farley was an older dog when I used to go on walks with her. My wife had her Farley for a number of years before we got together. But Buddy was like standing on the front porch, looking at me like, "Are we really doing this?" and so I went outside, and then so I was watching the news. I was flipping through the different news channels, the three big ones, and they were covering Pete Hegseth, and there was breaking news on him. The police report just became public, and they were talking about that. That probably broke about an hour before. Today's Thursday, November 21st. So this was around 12 o'clock noon. And then they broke into that breaking story, and they said that, his other guy, Gates, had withdrawn. And so we'll start here. Trump's defense pick, Pete Hegseth, breaks silence on alleged sexual assault. Secretary of Defense designee Pete Hegseth spoke publicly for the first time Thursday on allegations that he sexually assaulted a woman in 2017. As far as the media is concerned, it's very simple. The 44-year-old told reporters on Capitol Hill, "The matter was fully investigated. I was completely cleared, and that's where I'm going to leave it." But unfortunately, that's not where everyone else is going to leave it. Pete. So there's this here.
President-elect Donald Trump's defense secretary pick, as Politico puts it this morning. For the first time, we are now seeing the police report at the center of a sexual assault allegation against Pete Hegseth. With Hegseth's nomination already facing scrutiny, the report in graphic detail now reveals conflicting accounts of what happened in a hotel room 7 years ago. Sarah Murney has been pouring through the 22 pages of this police report, and you lead us off this morning. What are the details that you are hearing, knowing that they are pretty disturbing?
So kaboom.
Yeah, it is disturbing. And this police report really does give conflicting accounts of what happened this evening in October of 2017 in California surrounding a Republican women's conference. And I want to get to the woman's account first. She's referred to as Jane Doe in
She's Jane Doe.
Police report.
That's not a real name.
She says she encountered Hegseth at this conference. He was giving off a creeper vibe. She says
he was giving off a creeper vibe.
She ends up in a strange hotel room, and when she's there, Hegseth took her phone from her hands and he blocked the door with his body. She went on to say she remembered saying no a lot. Now, there was a lot she couldn't recall.
Okay, so wait a minute. Okay, so the problem with her testimony, and I'm not defending this guy, I can't say, part of this is about Trump and the way Trump does things. And I find that humorous and kind of hilarious, but also disturbing, right? So it's both things. But she says he was giving off a creeper vibe And then she somehow ended up in a strange hotel room. Let's go back to that, what that woman said here.
Doe in this police report. She says she encountered Hegseth at this conference. He was giving off a creeper vibe. She says she ends up in a strange hotel room. And
okay, if the guy was giving off a creeper vibe, how do you end up in a strange hotel room with him, right? I mean, that happens, right, where people have a reaction to somebody and they still end up being with them, whatever it is, right? Occasionally that happens. But most times when someone has a creeper vibe, maybe later on you could end up being with that person, right? But your first reaction is stay away from that person. And then if you spend time with that person, they kind of, maybe you were wrong about your intuition, or more likely that person just wears you down or you get used to them or something like that, right? You overlook your initial reaction. But oftentimes your initial reaction is the right one. And what you end up thinking later on is a deception or self-deception. Maybe there's past life thing going on, some scars. But that first night when you meet somebody who's creepy, you tend to stay away from them. And again, I'm not disputing her testimony, and none of this stuff is, real to me. It's all just part of a show. But there's a contradiction here.
She's there. Hegseth took her phone from her hands and he blocked the door with his body. She went on to say she remembered saying no a lot. Now, there was a lot she couldn't recall, and she said she believed something may have been slipped into her drink.
So there was the, what do they call that stuff? Roofied. He roofied her like this. It's not, he went to a female women's conference, and this is what happened there.
There were other witnesses who said when they saw her, she did not seem to be overly intoxicated. There were also conflicting accounts from witnesses at this conference about an interaction that this woman had with Hegseth at a bar at the hotel. One person said that Hegseth was hitting on another woman, and Jane Doe arrived to be a, quote, crotch blocker to stop him from hitting on this other lady. A different...
a crotch blocker? So this is really a classy report.
Conference attendee said it appeared that
he has a very Matt Gaetz demeanor. There's just, there's narcissism, and there's, like sort of a, I wouldn't say creepy is there, but also like just, like there's a Jack Nicholson aspect to these guys. Like Matt Gaetz looks like he could be Jack Nicholson's son. That kind of a person, right? Like there's just like almost like an alien, like not really a human, like some kind of not like a normal human, some alien clone put out here or something, alien, invading someone's body kind of thing. That expression he has on his face.
Jane Doe and another woman were flirting with Hegseth. At any rate, a few days after this incident took place in the hotel room, Jane Doe does go to seek medical attention. She gets a rape kit. She tells the hospital that she's not sure if there was any penetration, but she believes that she was sexually assaulted. And then a nurse there reports it to authorities. Now, this is a very different account than what Pete Hegseth gave to authorities. He describes an evening of consensual sexual intercourse. He says that this woman, Jane Doe, ends up in his hotel room. He found it kind of odd that she stuck around, but they became intimate. And he tells authorities there was always conversation and always consensual conduct.
What do you mean always? That's a weird thing to say.
He said that he and Jane Doe discussed that she was married, and she said she would tell her husband she had fallen asleep on the couch in someone else's room. He also told authorities she showed early signs of regret, although he didn't describe what that means. Now, Timothy Parlatore, an attorney for...
Early signs of regret? Like, get off me, you creep. How early? What was her signs of regret?
Hegseth said that this police report confirms what I've said all along, that the incident was fully investigated and police found the allegations to be false, which is why no charges were filed.
Now, I think he was married at the same time, right? Like he's married now, I believe. We saw his Instagram. So, whatever this thing is,
Now, we do have to note the police report does not say that these allegations are false. It is true that there are no charges that were filed in this case. And there is other evidence that could help shed light on what happened. There's surveillance video. There's a memo from the district attorney's office that would kind of outline why they decided not to bring charges in this.
Okay, so this is a mess. And the problem with this is a couple of things here. That Trump is sloppy. You know, I'm not a detailed person. I'm not a perfectionist. I don't do meticulous work. I just am a just get her done kind of person. I just don't have that, like, you know. I mean, there's things I want to do well, and there's things I put more effort into. And, you know, I mean, I'm able to train and do things and work hard and get better and, you know, raise my skill level and things like that. But I, you know, am not, like, obsessive about it. And, you know, I can often be sloppy and things like this, right? You know, not so much here in the videos, but just in general. I'm a messy person when I cook dinner. I look on the floor and, like, how did I get all this stuff on the floor? Like, you know, making a salad or doing whatever it is. And I'm working to be more careful. You know, my wife has been, you know, trying to remind me to close the drawers because it, like, stuff always falls in them. And I've gotten better at that. But, like, I just, you know, I get into stuff and I sort of get, like, totally focused in on what I'm doing, and sometimes I just can be messy, right? Like, I get, you know, food on my clothes and stuff. We go out to dinner or something, you know? And so, you know, I'm not, like, all perfectionistic about things. But there are things when you work on them, you have to have a sense of detail, and you can't be sloppy. Like, when you work on plumbing, you can't have a drip, right? The plumbing has to be, you know, it has to be basically perfect. It has to be where there's no water leaking out of it. You can't have, like, oh, it's pretty good, like it's 98%. No, it's got to be 100% leak free, right? There's things when you work on that have to be, you know, done on a higher level. And Trump is sloppy. And he thinks more of himself than he is, and he oftentimes makes impulsive decisions. And he had a one term already. And he had 4 years between his first term and second term. So he's had 8 years of political experience now. And he talked about this with Joe Rogan, that he came in, he didn't know what he was doing. And he had to appoint these people. And one of the things he said about them is that the good thing about these guys who are already in Washington, D.C., they've already been vetted. And you don't have to worry about something like this happening. And so he admitted, like, he understood that somebody who's a career politician and lives in a political, you know, reality, and they know when they've got skeletons in their bag, you know, skeletons in their closet, and that these things are going to come out. And, you know, the stuff with RFK Jr., there's a lot of skeletons in his closet, aside from, you know, and there's power people against him. I don't know about Hegsmith, but if the military-industrial complex doesn't want Hegsmith as a defense secretary, then he ain't getting confirmed, right? All these guys is the same thing. And so the pharmaceutical company doesn't want, and it's pharmaceutical company second to the military-industrial complex in terms of influence in D.C. And all these affairs that he had, his wife committing suicide when he was cheating on her, like he cheated on her like 30 times and kept a diary of his affairs. His wife found it, and she committed suicide shortly after. I mean, this is stuff the New York Post reported, and whatever truth there is to these things. This recent affair he had, you know, with some woman who's, you know, got fired from her job because of it. And so, like, Trump has appointed all these people, and there's opposition from power groups against these people, and they have skeletons in their closet that, you know, can be used against them and him. And so if he gets blown out on some of these big appointments, right now it's the Attorney General, that's a big appointment, Defense Secretary, and then also with the Health Secretary, you know, the guy who's in charge of the Health Department, which would be Kennedy, he's going to lose on all those three, probably. And those are big ones. So those are three swings and a misses, all because he's really sloppy. And he knows better. Like he said, you know, just recently on Joe Rogan, that he understood that you really had to vet these people from the private sector because they've never gone through this kind of vetting process before. And they're not even aware of what can be used against them, right? And so, like, being sloppy and being like not perfectionistic. I mean, people with OCD are difficult to be around, and they have their own, issues. But sometimes you need an OCD person, right? Sometimes an OCD person is somebody who has that level of, perfectionism in them is important. Like, it's a quality that is annoying and difficult to be around until you need somebody like that, right? And Trump is just too sloppy and too incompetent, and he just doesn't learn and change and grow, right? And again, I don't care about this. Like, it's just fun for me to watch. But he's already fucking up his first administration by all these picks. And then there's the picks he has, like Vince McMahon's wife, where he was just going to put her somewhere. People who are loyal to him, people who he, thinks highly of, people who are very complimentary to him. He's just going to put them in something. He's like, what do you want? All right, you're going to get something. What do you want? Oh, you want to be in charge of the education? Sure, go ahead. Right? I'm not, I'm already thinking about getting rid of that anyway. So go ahead. You go in and fuck that up. It's more like just, I mean, everything is so, bringing in his criminal cronies and people that support his bullshit, right? And that's just bad. Like, and it's already coming out. It's funny. Like, it's just totally Trump. Okay. I had this video starting to render it, and then I went and looked at some of my news sites. And Huffington Post, Gates pulls out, which is kind of a sexual reference here. 60 days till Trump takes office. We won't back down. Support Huffington Post today. This sounds like Alex Jones, right? Like, now they're all under assault by Trump, and they're looking for their freaked out liberal people to support them. GOP senators breathe sigh of relief. CNN publishes bombshell scoop minutes after withdrawal. And so that's, interesting. And so what the scoop is, Ethics Committee told of a second encounter between Gates and a 17-year-old girl that party sources say. And so this is CNN's piece about it. Okay, here's a CNN report here.
Former Congressman Matt Gaetz has withdrawn his nomination for Attorney General. But Dana, this comes about 45 minutes after we reached out to him about some new reporting that we have. And this new reporting is that there was a second sexual encounter between him and an underage woman at a party in 2017. Now, I have covered the investigation into allegations that the congressman may have had sex with a minor for 4 years now. And Dana, this was the first time.
Okay, so now this is problematic, because if he actually did do this twice and they let him go, so this is a blemish on the Republican Party. Again, I'm going to get into Trump's sloppiness probably after this, because I've made the rest of the video that you've seen. This is my late addition to this video. But I talk about Matt Gaetz and the other guy, whatever the fuck his name is, and the guy for the Defense Department. And they have this arrogant look on them, this smug look. The guys at CNN have this smug look. These rich, entitled, bratty punks. The Trump kids, especially Donald Jr., they have this smug look. There's just something like very smug and just condescending and, just very like pricky and immature and punky about these guys. And Trump really likes these guys. I mean, his kids are like this. He hung out with all these guys, like the Donnie Deutsches, the Donnie Douches, and the rest of those guys who are like this. This is Trump's kind of people. And they don't understand why people don't like him, right? The American people don't like him, but they're just smug and off-putting. And, they're arrogant. But if he did do this, and the Ethics Committee still allowed him, they cut some kind of deal, and they allowed him to stay there, and he was just being an asshole, like I said before. Like, I heard him, and I'm like, oh my God, that guy's such a punk. And he's been doing this, and then Trump nominates him knowing that he did these things when they were supposed to be the anti-Jeffrey Epstein party. Like all these people, the QBs, all these people voting for Trump because of Jeffrey Epstein, and yet Trump was a big Jeffrey Epstein guy. And then he's going to house parties in California as a House of Representatives, congressman. Like, it's kind of fucked.
That we had learned that the underage woman had testified to a second sexual encounter. And I learned from my sources, along with our colleague Sarah Ferris, that she had testified to this to the House Ethics Committee. Now, I want to read our story. Again, this announcement that he is withdrawing comes as a bit of a surprise. We reached out to him 45 minutes ago to give him a chance to weigh in on this story. And again, his withdrawal comes just a short time after CNN reached out about our reporting that there was a second sexual encounter that the alleged underage victim testified to the House Ethics Committee. Now, let me read you our reporting, Dana. The alleged underage victim has testified that both of these sexual encounters, the one that we always knew about and this new one, occurred at the same party in Florida in 2017. And Dana, I am told that she gave consistent testimony in both the ethics investigation and a civil lawsuit in Florida. Now, I want to note that the Justice Department investigated these allegations that Gates had sex with a minor and did not charge him. He has always denied wrongdoing, and we reached out to him 45 minutes ago to get a reaction to this. He did not authorize a statement.
He's such an arrogant prick, you just believe it. Like, he's an insincere. This is not a person who's, got remorse and, I mean, he's just a little punky, little rich boy, little, like just whatever he did or didn't do, he's totally capable of doing it, right?
And instead, we're seeing that he is now withdrawing. Now, I want to note that what's notable about this testimony is that the underage woman testified that the second sexual encounter also involved another adult woman. Now, the adult woman has denied that there was a threesome. Gates has always denied that he had sex with a minor.
Well, she started talking threesomes on CNN.
But of course, this new reporting was coming as President-elect Trump was trying to shore up support on Capitol Hill to get Gates confirmed. I think this is also important, this new reporting, because it reminds people that there are things about this investigation that are still not public. But again, we reached out 45 minutes ago to Gates' team to tell them that,
like I said, they probably had something else on him or whatever. Maybe there was this. But the guy is just icky. But Trump loves these kind of guys, and his defense secretary, is the same kind of guy. They look exactly like almost they could be brothers. There's just an arrogance. Hunter Biden, they have that Hunter Biden look, that smug, rich, entitled, arrogant, white guy kind of swagger, just like it's the same thing. And, people hate Hunter Biden but like this guy, but they're the same guy, right? But anyways, Trump is just, like, these are just bad choices, right? So here's the thing. If Republicans, one more thing to say, I'm editing here, I want to get back to the rest of the video and then maybe cover this more next time or tomorrow. But if the Republicans who were on the ethics committee and these people, they covered up for him, which it looks like is probably the case, then when this comes back out and he gets scrutinized and he goes through all this testimony, it comes out that he did do these things, or people believe he did those things, and the Republicans covered up for him and all those things. It becomes a whole nother nightmare. And they all knew about this ahead of time, so it's incompetence with Trump. But I said this before the election and after it. Just because you win the election doesn't mean you won, right? Like, you'd be better off losing this one because shit's going to go down that you're going to get blamed for. It's going to be a tough ride. America's collapsing. And, like, he's already losing. This is a real bad day for Trump. And, it's going to represent more bad days for him ahead, right? And so he's just looks like a bumbling idiot. And I get into this more at the end of this video. But it doesn't look like winning. Like, this doesn't look like winning, right? You got to gloat, you got to see the liberals cry, and that's great. But now comes to, Trump trying to deliver on promises he can't deliver on, and America being in the state that it's in. Like, these things are beyond America, somebody's control of turning the thing around, right? Anyways, let's move on to the other stuff here. Okay, so I want to get into The View and back into Trump and all these things in a moment. But this was something I recorded 2 days ago, and I explain everything in a second. But it's a real reality check. It's a real barometer for how fucked up America is right now. And so let's get into it here. Okay, so I'm not sure where I'm going to put this in my next video. Today's Wednesday, November 20th, I believe. I saw this commercial on a football or basketball game. I think it was a football game. But either one, I was watching sports. And I thought that I would, sometimes I record the commercials off the TV, but I thought I'd remember the name of the company. And it's Blue Chew, but I didn't remember it. So then I had to go searching for it, which sucks because now I'm going to have all this stuff for EDS sent to me. But it was on a football game. I thought it was bizarre. Let's watch the beginning of it here.
Do you think a man has ever used Blue Chew with you?
Yeah, my boyfriend, he uses it all the time. Proudly.
Oh my God, so he's like subscribed.
Okay, so they got a couple of skanks dressed in slutty cold clothing talking about men using dick pills, and they're in their 20s. These are young women, right?
Yeah.
Really? And you like it?
Oh, it's on my card.
Babe, really?
Girl, I have needs. What do you mean, really?
So you pay for his Blue Chew?
It's like an investment in myself.
See, so you're just supporting him.
Of course.
And in turn, he's supporting you.
He's taking care of me, if you know what I mean.
Oh, we know what you mean. So think about how effed up this is. So if she was dating an older guy, he could probably afford his own Blue Chew, right? We assume. Right? So if this was about some older guy, so this is women in their 20s, and again, this is fake, and this is the way they ran the ad with this kind of, this tall format. Like this was on, big screen TV, and I'm like, why is there a tall format ad? That's why I was fast forwarding it, and I was like, that's weird. And so this is how they ran the ad on I think a national football game broadcast. But what's disturbing about this, and there's a lot of things that are disturbing about it, is that this young woman in this scenario they've cooked up here is on a subscription model for Blue Chew dick pills because her limp dick boyfriend can't get erection on his own, or she can't create that in him. And so he needs help, and he's probably in his 20s. And he can't support his own dick pull habit. And so this girl who's, can't just dump him and move on to another guy because he'll probably have the same problem because there's a war on testosterone. That what's ever happening with the male population, whether it be Wi-Fi, 5G, whether it have to do with the bloop or COVID or any of these numbers of things that have happened recently, just what's happening in terms of the emasculation of these young men and just all of it being on the internet, all these things, the Wi-Fi, all the things that have happened that have created a situation where there's a market now. Again, they could be marketing this to older guys by using these young girls in this scenario, but I don't think that's the case, right? I mean, certainly this is a male audience watching a sporting event, and so they're, marketing to a male audience. But the idea is that this woman is so desperate to make sure their husband, their boyfriend can, achieve an erection that she's willing to pay for his Blue Chew, right? And this is a huge business, I know, because I think it's called Hims. There's all these weird commercials that I used to get on Facebook from Hims. First they were focused on my abs. You get to a certain age and they run these targeted ads, and there was just older guys ab commercials all the time, and then it was Hims, right? And so, but they're marketing this for younger guys, which we know there's an issue here because these guys have been effed up in some way that they can't achieve, erections or whatever on their own. They need some sort of medication that comes with side effects and certainly lots of other issues to go with it. There's a little bit more here. Oh, kaboom. So I'm back in the editing process, and I'm watching this a couple of days later than when I first recorded it and first saw it. And I've noticed there's commercials that are in the tall format, like they're shooting on the phone, and most people are watching these on widescreen TVs. And even if you're watching on your phone, usually you have your phone tilted sideways. But the majority of people are watching it on widescreen TVs, except for young people. And so these types of videos are things that these are young people videos. Young people have tall videos, right? When I shoot videos on my phone, I shoot at wide angle. And so they're pushing this to young people. And that's everything you need to know about our society. Breakdown physically, breakdown morally, I mean, the woman saying she'd pay for it, just as she could have a man that has, can get an erection, right? So, like, I mean, a young man. So, like, it's just, the whole thing is just completely fucked. And so when you're thinking about all the things that I'm covering here, politically and everything else, this is what you're fighting for. Like when people talk about freedoms and American life, like this is where America is right now, right? Like this kind of stuff. I mean, you're fighting for these types of things, dick pills and video games, and people having kids having cyber lives, and the future that these kids have. Like it's not even a future at all. They're not even able to function, right? Physically, emotionally, spiritually. And that's the world we're leaving them, and that's what all this fight is, debate is, and the fighting that's going on between the left and the right, and Russia and America, and all these countries, and Israel and Palestine, and all the stuff. That this is the direction the world's going. Kids all over the world have cell phones, and they're all connected to this level of content and the things that go along with it, and so. It's not really worth saving, right? Okay, so I want to get back into Trump in a moment here. I'm going to go back and forth. Got a lot of weird, just odd things to piece together. But I saw this headline about this happening.
The Wall Street Journal claims that the shift to the right in this election reveals that Americans view themselves as belonging to a particular economic class more than their race and gender. And Bill Maher said it's not the only thing Democrats got wrong. Take a look.
Someone must tell the usual suspects on the far left that the saying is, when you're in a
he's talking about the View ladies. The blue whale.
hole, stop digging. You just lost a crazy contest to an actual crazy person. What a shocker that the people who see everything through the lens of race and sex see their election loss as a result of racism and sexism. Yes, if only we weren't so irredeemably unenlightened, we would have elected a black president by now. Oh, what, we did? Asked if racism is built into our society. White progressives agreed with that at higher levels than black and Hispanic people. They don't want your pity. And black people can't afford to indulge rich white people's need to endlessly flagellate themselves. They just want prices to go down and good jobs and the police when you call them.
Well, if he's right, then why didn't people vote for the former prosecutor who actually had policy plans to help?
Okay, so you actually believe that prosecutor bullshit? Like, you don't know how the internet works? The information was already out on Kamala. I mean, within the black community that didn't feel like she was legitimately, at least she was a poser, right? But also on the way that she locked up people for marijuana use, or that she locked up mostly black people for their kids being truant, including a commercial where there's a black woman who had a daughter with sickle cell anemia, and she missed a lot of school because that really sucks and is painful. And Kamala Harris locked her up, right? And so you believe that prosecutor bullshit? What, you believe what she said at the DNC? Like, that's either you're lying to your audience, which is partially true, or you actually buy into this bullshit, right? It's not a real thing. She wasn't some credible prosecutor. She was an opportunist who was building her resume and her career on the backs of other people, right? Like, everybody knew that about Kamala. No one thought that she was legitimately what they were saying. They were saying she was in the DNC thing. Like, yeah, people who are Democrats and wanted to delude themselves, but everyone else knew that she sucked, right? Like, you.
The working class. I mean,
Woo!
Again, I got my popcorn. I don't know why people did what they did. I see all these reasons, and so, okay, time will tell. But what do y'all think?
I just, I know that as a country, it's very difficult for people to believe that racism and misogyny, they're just alive and well. I think that...
it's just stupid shit. Like, you make it sound like that's all there is, right? Like, women don't get along with each other. Like, women have prejudice against each other. People have prejudice against each other in every demographic. years and years ago, I was playing basketball, and there was a mixed group of people there. There's a lot of black people, and these guys were making fun of each other because of the tone of their skin. I was growing up in a suburb, and my best friend at the time was a biracial kid whose mom was German, his dad was African American. And, I said to him, there's prejudice in the black community over the skin tone, like light skin and dark skin. The first time I understood that, I was in high school. And so, he didn't know it at all, right? And there's always that bullshit. There's always stuff like that people judge people externally. There's prejudice against good-looking people, against ugly people, against fat people, against skinny people. Right? Everyone has their different opinions, and people snipe at each other over the most silly, superficial differences. Oftentimes, people snipe at people who are very much like themselves. So it goes far beyond racism and sexism. Like, you think these are the only two forms of prejudice, right? Like, the world is full of prejudice. We all prejudge other people. We all look at people, and we associate them with whatever viewpoint of the demographic we see them as. We see homeless people. Some people feel compassion. Some people feel like resentment. Some people feel disgust, right? And the mentally ill aspect of that. Most of us, we just don't want to see it, right? We don't want to. It reminds us all that we could all be in that situation, right? Like, everyone has their different prejudice in the way that we see the world. And so, like, to make it just about those two things, because you're saying Kamala Harris had those two things against her, that was the least thing that she had against her. It was her personality. Because she had a good personality, she could have overcome those prejudices, because people already had a huge prejudice against Donald Trump. 52% of the people were never Trumpers, would never vote for Trump. So she just had to overcome some of these mild prejudices and connect with people and be a real person. And she couldn't do that. She's unlikable. When she talks and laughs, people are like, I don't like her at all. I mean, the majority of people, if you were going to run like test groups on her, they would say, I don't like her at all. Because that's what the Democrats did when she ran for president in 2020, right? They looked at her and said, she's really unlikable. I don't feel connected to her. And she's off-putting. So that was the biggest thing she had to overcome, not her race or her, complex genetic heritage and all these other things, right? And so, she lost because she's Kamala, and, it's kind of rigged anyway. And she didn't go through a democratic process. She would have lost in the primary. And would you have said that in the primary? That she lost because of race and when it was just Democrats? Because of race and gender? I mean, Hillary Clinton won kind of the primary. They cheated, but she won. She was a Democratic nominee as a woman. And Barack Obama won presidency, like he said. So these are things that can be overcome.
We don't want to think that about ourselves, our neighbors, our friends, but...
Why don't you want to think about that? Like, I freely know that everybody's prejudiced. They prejudge. It's a thing, right? Everyone does it. And on multiple levels. Prejudging is a behavior. It's a behavior about prejudice is a behavior. Prejudging is a behavior we all do. And it's, it's helpful in different ways. Knowing somebody that took advantage of you, right? Like, the same kind of person comes up to you and you don't get taken advantage a second time. Because it doesn't mean their demographics, but their personality type, right? You're looking at a situation like, those people over there look kind of like they're criminals, and you're like, I'm not going to prejudge them. You go over and they steal your shit, right? And beat the fuck out of you. Like, that tiger over there looks a little bit fierce. I'm gonna get rid of my prejudice. So I'm gonna go walk over and pet it, right? Like, some of it is actually survival skills. You look at something and you have a reference point to it, and it tells you, don't touch that hot stove. That stove is glowing with heat, and you can feel the heat coming off of it. I'm not going to be prejudiced against a stove. I'm gonna pat it and whatever. No, like, you're going to burn yourself, right? Like, these are things you learn, and it helps you. And, of course, it becomes, it can be like, over people can exaggerate these things. They can enter into paranoia and whatever it is, right? But prejudice exists for a reason, and it's not like prejudice is a good thing all the time, or it's correct all the time, but it's something that you need. It's a part of the way human beings and animals learn about something, right? Like, dogs need to be sprayed by a skunk once. But what'd you say about a dog that got sprayed by a skunk like 3 times, right? Like, that's a dumb dog, right? Like, you didn't learn the first time? Oh, yeah, the dog that comes home with porcupine quills in its mouth 10 times, right? Well, that's a stupid dog. Like, how many times do you need to realize that porcupine isn't something that you fuck with?
It's my lived experience tells me that it does still exist, even if your lived experience doesn't tell you that it exists. And
okay, so there's a big difference between it existing or still existing and its effect on an election, right? How much has prejudice been diminished to where, like, somebody like Trump who's unliked, that someone like Kamala could have been elected over him, right? And, there's all these liberal people who have reverse prejudice. Like, there's all this prejudice now towards white men, which we now know that, cisgender men, this whole thing that just talked about, right? I mean, there's people who have prejudice on both sides of the equation. But the reason Kamala lost, as legitimate this election was or wasn't, the one major reason is because she was inauthentic and unlikable.
The facts support that. I think we have a graph. If you look at there's a clear racial divide in who voted for Trump as opposed to who voted for Kamala Harris.
Yeah, but if you were a white person, right, and you were looking at what was best for you in terms of policies, you would think Trump was better for you. If you're a person of color, if you're a person of, these various different demographics, you would look at these policies of the person and the fact that Kamala Harris is campaigning to black people and campaigning to people of color and campaigning to the LGBTQ. It's long been associated that Republican is the party for white people and various rich people and these things, right? Pro-war people, people who are religious, Christians, and conservative, people who are conservative about these things. Where the left is for liberals and people of color and LGBTQ members and these things, right? Women, like women in terms of liberal women, particularly feminists, right? And so these are the groups that the people in these parties are pulling for. Like, they have pushed for these groups exclusively. And young people have usually been for the Democrats, but Kamala Harris lost all of these votes. Like, she might have done better than Trump, right? But if you put up the same graphic about what happened with Biden, and Biden did better amongst black people and Hispanic people and some of these other groups, right? And with white people, too. I think he did better with white people. And so you can say that that was an anomaly. That would say that they were fake votes, it was rigged, or Kamala Harris underperformed. But either way, if you're saying this, which I said initially when all this whining came from the Democrats on election night about white women not coming through for Kamala and picking their race over their gender, why would you not nominate somebody like Kamala in terms of her demographics if you knew how important it was to defeat Donald Trump? You got rid of an old white guy who was senile, so was, he shouldn't even have been president. But you got rid of him because you thought Kamala Harris had a better chance. A person who was never elected to national office, who was a joke as a vice president and was unlikable, and she did horribly the time that she ran for president. She polled under 1% amongst Democrats, and she proved over and over again that she was not likable, and people didn't like her. So you picked the wrong person, right? And then some of these things that went along with it, a lot of it was liberal woke stuff, right? You didn't pick Bernie Sanders because he was liberal and he was a socialist, and the liberals love him. And there's lots of people still pissed off that you had to pick these middle-of-the-road Democrats like Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris was trying to be that, right? But there's reasons why you guys pick middle of the road people because you can't win with a liberal. But the conservatives can win with a real conservative person, just barely. But there's more conservative people than there are liberal, especially for people who vote. There are a lot of young people who are liberal, but they don't vote, right?
It's very clear. It's not only clear by race, but it's also clear by education. And so the notion somehow that that is not true, this is by education. Those who attended college voted for her at a higher degree than those that didn't.
But I think you're missing his point.
Let me just...
But like that happens every election. These are the you're making it sound like this is something new that just happened because Kamala Harris was a woman in black. It happened it happened in every election. These are the demographics that you see, right? It wasn't because of her race or her gender that caused this divide.
Okay. Finish. And so I've said that before, and there was so much backlash because I think it's an uncomfortable, inconvenient truth about this country.
But his whole point is they didn't vote for him.
You're making it sound like, like she was a great candidate. She was likable. You guys stabbed Joe Biden in the back, and he shit all over her as a vice president. And now comes out that one woman who was the charge of the donations, the DNC donor population, that he never liked her. They never got along. They don't like each other. And he felt slighted and stabbed in the back. And you didn't run her in a primary. And you rolled her out there knowing that she had all these negatives. It's like you wanted to lose. And then she picked like the worst possible vice president who was more liberal than her. He called everyone else weird. And then you saw his wife and his family and him and like Richard Simmons' dance that he was doing. Like you probably pretend he was a coach, right? you try to call him coach, right? Like he was some normal white guy that you were trying to get the normal white guy vote. It turns out like people liked him less than they liked her.
Him because of racism and misogyny. They voted for him because they felt like, I think the biggest common denominator in this election is people want a good life and ability to provide for their family.
Well,
and whether we agree or not with Donald Trump's plans,
Black people
they thought that he was reflective.
One of the poorest demographics in this country, but they voted for Kamala Harris.
But there was a split, and more of them voted for Donald Trump than had historically. I think that there's such a desire. If you really...
Why don't you speak to that, Sonny? Sonny, why don't you speak to that? That more black people voted for Donald Trump than ever before. More black people voted for Donald Trump than they did when he ran against another white guy and Joe Biden. He got more black vote. Like, why was she so sucky? Nobody fucking liked her, right? In every demographic, she did worse. Like, just admit she sucked as a candidate. I mean, start with her unlikability. That you forced an unlikable candidate on the people. That didn't work with Hillary Clinton either. Hillary Clinton wasn't likable. And it wasn't because she was a woman, right? Like, there's plenty of women who are highly liked. Ellen was highly liked. Ellen had very positive ratings. Ellen had an 80%. Apparently she and her wife are moving out of the country to England or something. Somebody posted, I'm not sure if that's true, but someone sent me a meme. I don't have it, but just,
I think the vast majority of this country voted because of racism and misogyny.
You're
missing it. Most of my family, a lot of my family doesn't have college degrees.
But the stats are the stats.
But that's not, it doesn't say I'm white, I voted for Donald Trump because of racism. That's not what stat. What stat are you talking about?
Let me just dissect the
Yes, you can. There's a lot more.
The stats? What do you mean the stats are the stats? What is that? That means nothing. Like, those are the stats every election, right? Do you think that every election people are voting against other white candidates? Because the majority of candidates in the Republican and, before Obama were not women, were white men, right? So we've had a history of two white men running against each other. And the majority of black people voted Democratic and the majority of white people voted Republican. Unless there was some kind of a landslide or whatever it was, right? Like those, that one Reagan election. I mean, those elections where there was, almost a sweep of all the states, right? And that was, years and years ago. Now it's so divided. But everyone knows the category they're supposed to vote for. Everyone knows the party they're supposed to vote for. So, rolling out goofy stats, the real stats is, why did she do worse than Joe Biden? That's the real stat. She underperformed, and that's what you would look at. Why did she underperform? What was it? Was there a campaign, or was it her?
Hold on. Calm down. Everybody just take a breath. Take a breath.
Well,
take a beat.
Well, let me jump in here, because I think, Sonny, what you say is valid, and I think absolutely that is part of the problem. But when we hang our hat on that's the only problem, or
No
the
one's
main,
saying it's the only.
I'm not saying you are, but I'm saying the backlash is that when people hang their hat on that being the only reason, any criticism of Vice President Harris must be because she's a woman or she's black. I voted for, thank you, I voted for Hillary Clinton, not because she was a woman, she was the most qualified. I voted for Vice President Kamala Harris.
Woo! Woo!
Because more of my values fell in line with what she stood for.
Woo!
So all of that can be true. There is something here to the socioeconomic class, though, that is crossing racial divide in academic and education, too. Americans with a college degree 30 years ago were roughly 20% of the population and held the same percentage of household wealth as those without a degree. Yeah. 30 years later, this is important, Americans with a college degree account for 38% of the population and 73% of the household wealth. The haves and the have-nots have gone so far apart that they are rising up right now, and they cross every line of our democracy.
Okay, can I?
Okay, woo, woo, just get woo.
So look. Go ahead.
All right, here she goes.
I
This is the cream of the crop.
I think most people.
She's replaced Joy. They've just like get rid of Joy. They like said, "Fuck you" to Joy. Get rid. Now that Trump's elected, she's
are not saying that it was all about sexism and it was all about racism. Right. Most people are not saying that. I would say to Bill Maher, who I like, whose show I've been on several times, that maybe, just maybe, when you live life as a woman and as a woman of color, you feel it and you know it a little bit more than a white man does in America.
boom, go, just bringing it. Just look at her bringing the wisdom.
I'm not saying, he says that folks see everything through the lens of racism and sexism.
No, it was on election night, and we'll get to Joy, that woman Joy, the other Joy. Two joyless people, but the one that's on CNN. She was saying on CNN, is CNN or CNN? Joy Reid. She was saying that night it was white women that cost the election, right? There was all these things, and there was this stuff about prejudice with Kamala. But if you had that lens beforehand, and you grew up as a woman and a woman of color, and you see these prejudices your whole life, right? Like everyone has their, people have a reaction to them, and people look at you a certain way. I often tell this story that I had a brief counseling business, and I set up, I wrote a book and I built a website, and it was sort of it was about transforming abuse. I have a master's degree in counseling, all these things. And I had this, spiritual experience that led me to phase 1 was called Pranhuiti Counseling. Phase 2 was Pockets of the Future. And so it's this, spiritual experience I had in 2003, which led to what I do now in terms of Pockets of the Future. And that's evolved over time, right? And I always thought counseling was going to be a part of it. But I realized that I'm just not good at it because I don't like to listen to people's problems. I really dislike it. It's a big liability as a counselor, right? And so I set up this booth. You have these booths at these wellness seminars or whatever they are. People set up tables and booths, and I had a poster, and I had you don't even know where this stuff is. I had a banner, and I put it up there. And I noticed when people saw me standing there, and I was going to talk to people, which was a big mistake because I'm not, socially inept. I was giving it my best try, though. I was doing my, And I would watch people, and they'd walk to the booth to my right, and then they'd walk away from me, the opposite direction from my booth, and they turn right in front of me, and they walk in front of me, but far enough to where they wouldn't make contact with me, right? And then they'd walk back towards the next booth. So they just walked around my whole booth, avoiding me as much as possible, like I was a fucking leper, right? And I thought it was funny because, I understood it. I didn't take it personally. Because when my ex was in the booth, people were talking to her. Nobody would come talk to me. And, I just have this off-putting energy. My friend said I used to be intimidating on the basketball court, which, I'm not I have a soft heart, you know. But externally, people have trouble approaching me and talking to me. You know, my kids even. I mean, this thing. It's just, you know, who I am, and part of it's my own creation, my own boundaries, and my own whatever it is. You know, I'm pushing people away. And so you have accepted that about myself. When people see me, you know, that's what they see me as, right? You know, they see me as somebody they don't want to be near or whatever. You know, there's that element. It's not the only way. Some other people see me differently. You know, some people are attracted or whatever it is. But, you know, there's that element. And so everybody lives with those things. And it's not just about your race or your gender, I mean, even your physical appearance. It's the energy you exude. It's all these things. Like they say that criminals can target victims, and they learn how to read people's body language, whether they're aware of that or not. And they will target certain people. Certain people are constantly being victimized. There's all these things you have to live with. It's how other people perceive you and how other people, you know, relate to you. And it's in your gestures, your mannerisms, your facial expressions, all these things. People think I'm unhappy all the time, and I feel pretty happy most of the time. But if you looked at my face, you would never see that, right? And so what I'm saying is her silly little thing about what it's like to live as a woman of color, yeah, that's one thing. But you don't know what it's like to live as a white guy, right? Or, you know, an older person or a younger person, like every, you know, teenager. Like everybody has their issues. And, you know, instead of looking at it like you're some sort of a victim and blaming everything on that, right? And if you actually thought that ahead of time, why would you run a person of color, a woman, against Trump when this was supposed to be a election of the, you know, if he wins, America was fucked and he was going to be a dictator on day one. This is why I said that night. Why run her then? If you're so convinced that Americans would never elect a woman of color, then why would you run a woman of color? Like just to throw it in their face and complain about it, right? Why you picked a person. You didn't even send her through the democratic process. You got rid of the old guy. You forced him out. The political party, you know, your Democratic Party forced him out after years of being senile, and they could have dealt with this a year ago and had a proper primary, but you didn't want RFK Jr., you didn't want, you know, to run a primary. You handpicked Kamala Harris, who nobody liked, and she lost. And now you're complaining about it? Like you fucked up, like you fucked yourselves, right?
Not everything. But if you're not seeing racism and sexism in America, then you need to clean your lenses.
But yeah.
Because, you know, so you know, look,
clean your lenses, woo!
This is something that I also find interesting, that when Democrats and liberals talk about race or sexism, it's immediately labeled as identity politics, which has a negative connotation. It's a term that Republicans have coined, and it's been very effective. But when Donald Trump goes to Miami and talks to Cubans, that's not identity politics. When Donald Trump goes to Dearborn, Michigan and promises Arabs something, that's not identity politics. When he goes to Jews and promises them the opposite, that's not identity politics.
Oh, just look at it. Look, she just cracks through it. She just cracks the code.
It's important that we remember 2/3 of this country does not have a 4-year degree. And in fact, 38% who do live 9 years longer than those who don't. Something is happening in this country. It's a lot of my family who don't have 4-year degrees. They may not even have associate's degrees, who they're working harder than they ever have. They have multiple jobs and they can't get ahead. Kamala Harris had this great thing about $25,000 for first home buyers. That is aspirational, beyond aspirational for a lot of this country. They don't have the credit. They don't have the money to match the other $25,000.
Okay. The problem with the ladies on The View is they suffer from the same thing Kamala Harris does. They've somehow eked out an audience, right? I think maybe Whoopi's the most likable. Like, I mean, what do you think? Like, if you had to sit down and talk to any of these people, and you don't want to talk to any of them, right? Not because of what they believe. I mean, it's just a very annoying show. And it's not because they're women, right? I could say the same thing about multiple shows. I could say the same thing about Jimmy Kimmel or a number of these other people, right? These various, you know, there's so many people out there. It's partly their beliefs, but it's mostly who they are. And it's the way that they present themselves. And when you talk to them, you're like, oh my God, I got to get out of here. Like if you're forced to talk to somebody like this, it just sucks. And Kamala Harris has that, where, you know, other people are easier to talk to. And the problem existed with Joe Rogan. Now, Donald Trump did some bad things on Joe Rogan. He wasn't answering the questions correctly. He seemed a little bit incoherent. Joe Rogan had to redirect him multiple times. But Donald Trump's interview with Joe Rogan and Donald Trump's ability to be just real and authentic, as opposed to what Kamala Harris is, Kamala Harris couldn't do that interview. I mean, that's everything. Like, that's all you need to know. Pick somebody who could sit down with somebody and have a conversation and be authentic and be who they are, and then also appeal to people. That's all you guys have to do. You haven't picked a person like that. You didn't have anybody in the last 3 presidential primaries, maybe Bernie Sanders, who could do that, other than Bernie Sanders. Almost everybody else is not likable and couldn't be elected by the way they presented themselves, right? They just couldn't do it. Like every candidate you put out there, even these crappy candidates that were like, were there for, 1% of the vote. Let me say this before I get into this Joy Reid thing. I went to close it out. I got off point there. The women on The View are not likable. They're off-putting. And, I said this about Kamala Harris, that expression that she gave, let me insert that here. The expression that she gave to Donald Trump was, any man knows, and most women would understand this too, but when a woman gives a man this expression, it's very unpleasant. Now, it could be the man, it's justified. The man could be fucking up again, whatever. And the woman gives this condescending look, but, you can be screwing up, and you don't have to be condescending, like a condescending bitch, right? Who just thinks she's so much better than you and whatever it is. And that's what she looked like in the debate. And when they all said she won the debate, I'm like, yeah, you guys don't know what that look looks like. Because Whoopi went on a whole thing about what Anna Navarro said at the end. I'm not going to show you that, but she basically said, I liked what you said because I know what it's like to grow up as a black woman. I see things differently, right? But you're not seeing things from other people's lenses either. You're seeing it from your own. And so, now you're not seeing it from the perspective of a man. And so Kamala Harris, someone gave her this advice to go look at Donald Trump with this, she didn't have to do that. Like people already, thought Donald Trump was a joke and they all knew bad things about Donald Trump. It made her look bad. Her expression was really, was negative and unhelpful. And so from my own personal experience, there are people who listen to me and immediately they have a negative reaction. There's people that meet me. And, I realized when I went around my own family, and I saw this with my ex when her brother came to visit, and I realized so many things about my ex when her brother was there. They had all these same tendencies, and, when I could see it, I'm like, oh, it's kind of, they were odd. Like there's just things that weren't, that were just off-putting. But they were both really smart, too, on top of it. Like they had this, they did well academically, really smart, but they, there's just this essence, which I saw with my brother and the rest of my family. It's the reason I don't want to be around my family. And I can only talk to my brother, for small bits of time, and we take long breaks. We connect for a little bit, and we talk every couple of weeks or every month. And then, we both need a break, right? And so I understand why people react to me that way. Like they just don't like me, or they just, they don't like my attitude. They just get immediately, they get offended. And, I've hurt people's feelings over the years by saying certain things and in ways that I didn't even understand. I just thought everyone was assholes like my family, right? So we all have those things, right? But you should know when you don't appeal to the majority of people. I could never be a politician. I wouldn't pander to people. And people would most part have a negative reaction to me. But there are people who see beyond the, whatever it is that is off-putting about me and the boundary stuff, and to see value and find value. I mean, it's a small percentage. It's probably about, I have less than 10%, single digits retention. People who watch my video, less than 10% of them, less than 10 out of 100, will see something worth sticking here for, right? Maybe there's probably 20% of people like some of the things I say, whatever, I don't know. I don't have the funds to find out about that. But if I look at the retention level, about the number of people who watch my videos and the people who stick with me here on this channel, at least for some period of time. After a while, people can just move on, right? But see something of value here. It's a small percentage, but it's enough to have an audience, right? So I can connect with 10% of the people, which is just about right for me. That's probably good for what I want to do. It'd be great if it was more people, in general, but 10% is, if there's more people in general and 10% was 20,000 or 50,000 regular viewers, that would be good. I'd be happy with that. But I'm not a mainstream person. I accept that and know that about myself. But these people on The View and this woman, Joy Reid, and the rest of them, they expect everyone to force themselves to like Kamala Harris or like them when they're unlikable, right? You have to recognize why people don't like you. And then you have to evaluate whether you should change or whether it's just, it's just accept that those people aren't going to like you. And for me, I'm not changing. I do change, but not for that. I don't want to be more likable, and I'm not going to pander to people or say what they want to hear or put on a fake slap on a fake smile. And I don't have the ability to do that. I just don't. And so I accept it, right? But you have to accept the truth of the thing. But all these people who are, looking to blame other people for their flaws, right? Or maybe not even their flaws, but their characteristics.
The women of America have been forced to witness not only an adjudicated sexual abuser be elected president, but then...
Again, it's not really adjudicated by the way it went. He is a creep, but so was Joe Biden. You dismiss what Joe Biden was. He's a snoozler and a groper and all those things, sniffing women's hair and being handsy. He had to address it, and you guys dismissed that. And you dismissing it with Joe Biden, then don't blame the voters for dismissing it with Donald Trump, right? Just because, you think you're better than the people who are Trump voters, you guys all dismissed Joe Biden's creepiness with women that legitimized diary entry by his daughter that they were showering together when she was in her teens, which is creepy. Just like I said earlier, people dismissing that Michael Jackson liked to have sleepovers with boys when he was in his 20s and 30s. It was his favorite thing. And so don't dismiss shit and then be upset at other people when they dismiss equally damning evidence and things like that.
And to see him offer some of the highest positions in government to men who have faced accusations of their own. As the New York Times points out, Trump has selected a defense secretary, an attorney general, a secretary of health and human services, and an efficiency czar, all of whom...
Okay, so we know about that stuff. There's something coming up here.
About what a second Trump administration will mean for women, what it will mean for access to basic reproductive care, to birth control, IVF, even no-fault divorce.
Okay, so, you got to be brain dead to think that misogynistic men want to impregnate women, right? Men are into birth control even more than women. In fact, it's a male type of thing, right? Because what birth control says is that you can have the pleasure of sex without the pain of childbirth, right? Without the pain of raising children. And so I understand why women are into that, but you should understand that men are into that more. Men who don't want to commit to women, who don't want to marry women, who want to have, multiple sexual partners. That's all men's stuff, right? Being promiscuous. It's worse for women in various ways. Having multiple partners, having, all the things that go along with that, and not having the things that women have internally, the desire to nest, the desire to have children on a level that men don't have that craving, right? Maybe mentally men want heirs or they want, offspring, but they don't want them all over the place, right? And so, and there's child support and all the other things that go with it. And then having to raise the children and all, being a deadbeat dad. So men are into birth control. I think more men are into birth control than women are. But women think it's their issue. They think that it's something they have to fight for, which is silly because men aren't, these are companies, probably most of the birth control companies are owned by men, right? And so they make it sound like men just want to have more and more babies running around all over the place. And they want to have unprotected sex and not, and have the woman have the kids and just, they want to have 10, 20 kids themselves. It's just not the case.
And how to best protect yourselves through all of it. Well, on this show, we want to provide you with the best possible information so that you are prepared to navigate whatever comes your way. And to help us do that, joining me now is Maya Wiley, president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. My good friend, thank you so much for being here. So let's just go through these in some sort of order. I think the first question a lot of people are asking is, should women right now be, number one, deleting that health app that tracks your periods and stockpiling things like Plan B and even birth control pills and maybe getting an IUD in advance of the Trump administration coming into power?
Well, I think one thing, Joy, that all women...
Stockpiling the abortion pill and birth control pills. Like, you know, what do you think men want to do here? What do you think the goal for men is, right? They want you to, like, men are psyched about the possibility of impregnating you, and especially when they don't want to marry you, like not wanting to commit or not having that, you know, saddled with the burden of a kid that they don't want. You think men want that? Like, it's silly. Like, what are you talking about?
Should recognize is it depends on what state you're in, first of all. I mean, we have...
Okay. It's just silly stuff. Like, it's just like goofy things. He's not getting rid of Trump was pro-abortion. Let's go to that right here. Let me show you these two things here.
Donald Trump on the abortion issue when he appeared on Meet the Press with Tim Russert back in '99. Let's watch.
Remember that guy? It's just so loud.
Well, look, I'm very pro-choice. I hate the concept of abortion. I hate it. I hate everything it stands for. I cringe when I listen to people debating the subject. But I just believe in choice. But I am strongly for choice, and yet I hate the concept of abortion.
But you would not. You've totally had. There was women he had. You know, where are all the abortions? So Trump cheated on all of his wives, multiple mistresses, right? So did he wear rubbers? I mean, he certainly was engaged in either birth control or paying for abortions, because there's no illegitimate Trump kids out there, right? So he has, 4 kids? 5 kids, right? He has 2 daughters and 3 sons. And so with 3 different wives. So he had 2 with the first wife, and then 3 with the first wife? I don't know. I don't know what Eric is, but he had at least one with Marla Maples. And so maybe 3 with the first wife, I don't know. And 1 with Melania. And where are the rest of these illegitimate kids with all the cheating Trump did, right? And he did a lot of it. So, you know, whatever his view on abortion is, what would happen if they got pregnant? Because he paid these women off not to even talk about the affairs, never mind have his illegitimate kids. And so he would have a lot of illegitimate kids out there if he hadn't paid for abortions. And these are some of the accusations against them, that he paid for abortions and things. Because, you know, there's that. This is the other thing here.
Watch your head. Very tall.
How are you?
Nice to see you. How's it going? Okay. How's it going? All right. That's great. All right.
Just right. All right. Hairspray. But it is mine, isn't it?
There. It's there.
Does it feel good?
Yeah.
I'm very uncomfortable. Look at that.
All right.
Okay, so there was Donald Trump glomming all over Mika, right? And then she rubs her fingers through his hair, and Joe Scarborough's getting jealous. And this is what Joe Rogan was talking about Trump, how the ladies on The View used to love him. Mike Barnacle and all these people are laughing, all these people that condemn Trump now and say how horrible he was. And Trump and them, they're all like this, right? The View ladies on The View used to love Trump. He was on that show all the time. And they used to joke around with him. There was no hostility. And then he ran for president, and they, you know, and then in the beginning they didn't care. And then when he started to win, they were like, oh my God, he's the worst person in the world, right? But they loved him beforehand. And all these people are like this. You know, they're connected, and, you know, after the competition or the disagreement, they're into each other again. I mean, this is what happens. We've seen it over and over again. And so, like, it's just all, like, silly. Like, you guys pretend you're all upset about something. But even after Trump won, they're not saying he's going to be a dictator on day one. And he's already doing fucked up shit, right? Like, they're still upset about it, but, and why didn't you run a better candidate? Like, if Trump winning was going to be a disaster, like, why didn't you just run a better candidate? Like, he doesn't believe in any of these things. Like, he's always been liberal. He's always been a part of the club. He believed in abortion, right? He used to go on The View and more Miko and Joe Scarborough and these things. And then, became like, oh, he's one of them or one of the horrible people, the MAGA Republicans, everything he represents. And then, what happens when he's done and he can't run for president anymore? You're going to have him on then or whatever. Or what happens if you see him socially? And so, like, it's just all fucking made up, right? Greetings, brothers and sisters. I just want to say something about heart-related issues for people who didn't get the bloop but had COVID. There was a long comment from someone who described their situation yesterday about having, elevated heart rate and heart issues, something that I went through with COVID. Really wasn't the first time I got COVID. It was Omicron. And then just post-COVID, like after I had COVID, I had this irregular heartbeat and other issues. And so, people in the truth community think it's just people who got the bloop that have had issues, but it isn't the case. I'm hoping to do this audio book or whatever it is, some recording, and just put it up on Amazon. The stuff I want to talk about I can't do here. I guess I could put it up on some. Okay, so I finished up what you guys just saw, and I brought my dogs outside for a walk. It's snowing again, so it's coming down pretty hard. And I went for a walk with the weights, the thing I do, and got my heart rate up, and then I take a cold bath, and, I do my teeth. I do like a water pick and flossing and brushing my teeth, and I do some more weights and things inside, and I then go take a cold bath. We have well water that comes in about between 50 and 60 some degrees. I haven't really taken the temperature on it, but, it's pretty cold, and it's colder in the winter. I think I've been doing the cold bath for like a year and a half now, and it's been really helpful. My energy levels change and these things. I've been getting my heart rate up because of, I watched this video, and there's some woman, she's talking about how as you got older, your heart, decays a little bit when you stop exercising. But if you get your heart rate up to like 7 minutes a day and you keep on increasing it, after some time, your heart gets younger again, right? It's, and since the COVID thing, I've had to fight back and, regain my health and my strength and things. But anyways, so I did some exercises before I got in the tub, and there was a debate going on. Not so much a debate. LeBron James came out and said he's going off of social media because the sports media is too negative. And it was what I turned the TV on, and Stephen A. Smith was there with a few football people and a basketball guy, and they were all kind of defending themselves, right? Their role and how, like one woman said, a football woman said, players want to be known as individuals. They don't want to be lumped together, but they lump the media in together, which is true. And, all these things. So there's a guy who's just a former player, and he was talking about people like, how can you criticize people when you're just on the field a year or two ago yourself, and all these things like that, right? So I put some of the DMSO on, and I diluted it, but I guess not enough, and it's like itching like crazy. It's like kind of problematic. It's interfering with my flow here, but anyways, Stephen A. Smith was talking about how LeBron James and JJ Redick's podcast was, sneakily negative towards certain people. Like he was throwing people under the bus without naming them, things like this. So they had this debate, right? And the basketball guy, Brian Windhurst, at the end said that, that he agreed with what Stephen A. Smith said, but also said that we could be more positive. And what they missed out on is what drives the negativity is the audience. Because people don't want to hear about kumbaya kind of shit, right? People don't want to hear about how great your life is on social media. They don't want to see all these pictures of you being happy. They don't want to see how much better your life is than their life and how you're living your best life that people do on Instagram. They don't want to see that. I used to have a lot of Indian friends because of the Sajmarg meditation, before the Daji debacle. And there's huge academic pressure there to, for students, because there's so many people. There's a billion kids, and they can fail one test and their life is over. They're never going to get a good job, especially kids who grow up in middle class and educated families. And the pressure is enormous. Their academic pressure is so enormous. The family pressure. Kids commit suicide at young age. There's a school, the Lology Memorial Omega School, which the third master of the system Chargy started. And there was a kid in the school, and he didn't want to take a test. He was so stressed out about it. He got on a train, and these trains in India, I can't even describe how sketchy they are. I mean, just, the people and the trains and all of it. It's just, it's nothing like you would experience here. And the kid just got on a train by himself and disappeared for like 3 months. And no one knew where he was, right? Everyone thought he was dead, this thing. And so there was a number of people who posted over the years. I would see how great their kids were doing academically. Oh, my kid is just past the 10th standard. He's number one in his class, things like this, right? And we see how, Indians do in terms of spelling bees and things like that, because it carries over culturally. I mean, the pressure for academic excellence. And that's why there's so many people from India that are in the software business or doing things in America, these educated people, right? And so they would praise their kids. And then somebody wrote a post maybe 2-3 years ago in which they said, it's really disrespectful to come out here and brag about your kids when there's so many of us here who as kids are failing or doing poorly in school, and there's so much stress and pressure, and it's hard to watch, it's just basically bragging. And the person was saying shit like that, right? Because no one wants to hear how great you're doing. And the Indian people, in terms of selfies, and I mean, we know this about social media in general, but in India, there was a movie I saw. It was like a 20-minute short movie where a guy was trying to get 100 likes on a picture, and he was doing everything possible to do that. At the same time, my family and I went to some zoo in India, and everyone was really not looking at the animals as much as they were there to take selfies of themselves. Their selfie in India is even more prevalent than you see in America, right? And when we would go to these gatherings, foreigners, as we would be called in India, we were very sought after. People would come up and want to take a selfie with us and then just walk away afterwards. So they could get that on social media so they could get likes and things. Because, it's just this fake stuff that everyone displays on social media, right? And nobody's interested in that shit. People want drama. They want, it's like the Matrix movie where the Smith character is talking to Morpheus. He's captured Morpheus. The Smith character is a, computer program and a security program. And he's saying, we built a utopia for you guys, the Matrix, because they were using these human batteries, and they have to stimulate their minds to keep them, generating electricity, right? Because the humans torched the sky so there couldn't be any more solar power. Machines, AI technology, and computers took over the world, and so they tried to get rid of electricity, so they instead used the human beings to generate their electricity, right? In these pods. And they built the Matrix to keep their minds stimulated because they would die otherwise. And so there were these, they were basically asleep in these pods. And it's kind of an interesting concept given the truth community, right? And he said that they made the Matrix like in a utopia where everything was joyful and wonderful. And people couldn't live. They all started rejecting the Matrix because they didn't want it, right? Which makes, that's kind of how it would be. But either case, the majority of people seek drama. They seek, problems. They seek conflict. They don't want to be loved. They dislike themselves, don't think they deserve it, and all these blah, 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 blah. And when it comes to sports or anything else, that's what they want. And so this news reporter spent a little bit of time talking about the victory and how great the champion played and how great the team played, or a great game, and how great the game was and how everyone played great and everyone came through. But the majority of stuff they talk about is mistakes, mismanagement, bad decisions, all these things, right? Failure, and any kind of controversy. And they set in on the people because that's what the audience wants, right? And it drives up the interest in the sports themselves. Of course, there's betting and gambling. It just becomes more and more seedy because everything gets grosser and ickier the more people that are part of it. You take something that's organic and innocent And then it starts to trend, and before you know it, it's gross and disgusting because the more people that get their hands on it, the more it becomes perverted and an abomination. You know, I started to cover Hollywood and politics and all these things because if I just talked about the spiritual things and what to do and the greatness of your, or not the greatness, but the wonderful experience of connecting to the divinity within you, no one would listen to me. I mean, I have an even smaller audience than I have now. Because people want drama, they want bullshit, they want negativity. This is just how it is. And, you know, we all, to some extent, enjoy that stuff, right? People want gossip, they want dirt and things like this, and it's reflected in their choice of what's on TV, right? It's not that they've been contaminated with these things. People wanted these things before there was TV. They wanted them before there was radio. People just gravitate to drama and negativity, right? And complaining and, you know, blaming and all these things. And then after I got done with my bath, I put on some oil and DMSO, and I have these sort of like a thing that's, I don't want to call it a stepper, but it's like a small machine that you can sort of do steps on, not like what people would think is a stepper, but it's, you know, it's a non-electric little thing that my wife got years and years ago, and I use it occasionally, especially in the winter. And so I'm using it, and I had the news on, and they're talking about a New York Times article, and they talk about the Me Too movement, right? And they have the guy who wrote the article, and they read part of the article, and he's talking about how Trump's appointments of Gates and whatever this guy's name for the Defense Department is, it begins with an H, whatever it is. I already said it earlier in the video. I could go look it up, but not go Heg Smith, whatever. Pete, and so Petey, and you know that picking these two guys is a big fu at the whole Me Too thing, and him appearing on these, you know, the Logan brothers, the Paul brothers, and these other shows that are, you know, angry young men shows on the internet, right? And that this is this part of that movement. Is it Hagsath? Hogwarts or Hagard or whatever that guy. So anyways, that this is part of that whole, you know, group of young men who are very angry and the way they were demonized, and that Trump is pushing that, you know. And before that, I had seen, not on the news, but here on my, you know, videos on YouTube, that there was a woman, maybe it was on Fox, I think maybe it was on the news I saw earlier today, and she was saying, you know, this is why you lost to Democrats, right? And you get to say that for, you know, a year or two. I mean, all these people who are trying to make excuses and blame the voters and call the voters racist and call the voters stupid and they can't get it right with Trump. You know, for years, that's what they said to Trumpers. Hey, the country voted, and they said F you to you guys, not just in terms of the Trump-Biden election, but all the midterm elections and all the red waves that didn't happen. And they said America has rejected Trump and his movement. That's what they said for the last 4 years after the Trump, you know, defeat to Biden, and then after the midterms in 2022, and that Trump couldn't win an election. Every time Trump supported somebody, they lost, and they said that he no longer has, you know, he's been demonized and he's been, you know, his brand is damaged, and you guys are just on the wrong side of America, right? And that's what the Republicans are saying now. This is why you lost. But you only get to say that for 2 years or 4 years. It's a stupid thing to say because the American people are stupid and are, you know, short-sighted, and they can be easily swayed. And, you know, if you're saying that your ability to convince Americans first about, like, an image of you that's not true, like a profile of you that you've created, and that the things that you support and are for are somehow in their best interest. And if you can convince all these dopes who are consistently lied to by both parties that somehow you guys represent them, and you get them to vote for you, and then inevitably you disappoint them, and the voter swings to the other side, that somehow this is confirmation that you're on the right side of things, right? And I'm saying all that because, you know,
it's all bullshit, right? Like, whether something's true or not is whether it's true or not. And there's different layers of truth. Like, there's a spiritual truth, there's material truth, there's political truth, which is 100% subjective, right? You know, you're basing the acceptance of reality and what's important on what the American people want and what they're willing to vote for and what you need to say to them and what you're willing to what you're willing to lie about to them, right? But for the majority of people, they don't do what's best for them. Like, most people are self-sabotaging and they have going in the negative direction. And, I'm basing that on somebody's spiritual path being the barometer, what somebody's spiritual path. But they're miserable, like doing things that are bad for them, eating poisons, gambling when they know that it's system's rigged against them, losing their money, doing things to sabotage themselves with their relationships and loved ones, hurting their loved ones and things. So they, which comes back to them, right? Divorce and misery, cheating, lying, mistreating, lack of selflessness, being selfish and things. And all these things lead to misery and loneliness and, poor health, eating poisonous foods and drinking alcohol and drugs, doing things that are known to have negative side effects, taking things that cause you to suffer one way or another, believing people, whether it be the medical community or any of the powers that be, that are proven to be liars, right? Keep on believing them over and over again, believing the next guy comes along, says that he's not like all the other ones, and whether that next guy's a politician or a prospective husband or something, and it turns out to be exactly the same thing, and you're like, why does this keep on happening, right? Falling for the same bullshit, attracting the same negative people towards you, just doing the same bad things and expecting different results. And so most people are going in the wrong direction, lost, and just, it's just an absolute mess. Of course, we now have the belief wars, right? And people say, this is what's going to happen, and I know it, and I know this, and I know that, and I know D, and all this stuff, right? But the fact of the matter is, Trump's presidency is going to go whatever way it goes. And if it fails, it's not his fault, it isn't the Democrats' fault, it's just the way it's going to go. Like, it's beyond that. Of course, he sucks, and he doesn't have the ability to be a good president, but if things happen, it's more out of luck and just, just the way the cookie crumbles. But when his presidency fails, it doesn't mean that Kamala would have been better. Just like when Kamala lost, didn't mean Biden would have won, right? Like, it doesn't mean just because the one person fails that the other person was good. The Democrats fail, now the Republicans are going to be great. No, they're not. And when the Republicans fail, the Democrats are going to be great. No, they're not either. Because people believe that, there's greatness is inevitable and America's going to fix itself and everything's going to work out happily ever after, and none of that stuff's true, right? It's all bullshit. And so, whatever's going to happen is going to happen. And some of it's going to be human error, and that's going to contribute, and there's going to be mistakes, and there's going to be reasons to blame people. But overall, the problem is this is a system that is taking people in the wrong direction. We're going against our, the divine laws and the divine principles and, just what's good and healthy and natural and normal. It isn't just the Democrats, it's the Republicans have been doing this for years. It's the bullshit, stuff in the religion, the evil part of the religion, manipulative aspect of the religion. It's a debt-based economic system, and it's all the deviant and, addictions and deviant behaviors and all the stuff that, all the poor food, all of it, right? It's just an absolute fucking mess. As I always say, it's a mess that we're dependent on and addicted to and, don't know how to live without, and we don't have a plan B. So, like, that's the reality of our situation. So there's desperate wishful thinking on either side, right? But, it's people looking at themselves and saying, what do I need to change, right? What's fucked up about me? Like, I can see it in other people, but what do I need to change? Like, how can I be a better person? What can I do to draw, like, positivity to my own situation, right? And it's not some, self-help seminar. It's about, like, really going inside and doing some real self-evaluation, not in some way to beat the shit out of yourself and, like, slam yourself, but admitting to some of the issues and things that you do, victim consciousness and other negative things, and seeing that you have to change those things, and then you have to find a system to help you change, and praying and, asking God to help you and provide something that will, help you become the kind of person that you need to become, find your soul's path in these things. And most people just aren't willing to do that because they're just bankrupt inside. They're just so worn down. They can't take another thing, right? They're so beat down by the system. And that's part of it. My wife and I were just talking. I was watching the Napoleon movie on Apple with Joaquin Phoenix. And it was kind of an odd movie, and I didn't know that much about Napoleon. But we were talking about, war, and I was talking about, parts of that movie. And they just walk right at you. They're walking at each other, these morons. They had the cavalry and they had their foot soldiers. This is back in the day where they weren't digging foxholes yet. But they would just walk at each other, firing their fucking one-shot muskets with their bayonets. And then when they get close, they would stab the shit out of each other with their bayonets. But before that, they would walk into enemy fire. Napoleon was charging the British at the end of Waterloo. Spoiler alert, he loses. And, he was some kind of military genius. But, I was looking at these various war scenes, and I had just looked up, how many people died in World War I and World War II. And then, I didn't think about the suffering, but it was like 70 million, 80 million people in World War II. But then there's all the people who suffered, the people who were injured, people who were starving to death and suffering. I mean, so much suffering. The infrastructure gets destroyed, and, people just get beat down by war. World War I, it was like 20 million. But then again, another 40 million suffering, people just not living the same lives. And, I watched these soldiers that went into Africa with Napoleon wearing their goofy, French uniforms in the heat of the African desert. And then he's over in Russia where it's freezing. And, they're underdressed. They're overdressed in Africa and underdressed. And these guys marching with, they were suffering from famine. They didn't have supply lines, and the food wasn't getting to them. And they're eating horses and God knows what else, right? The soldiers are starving and freezing to death, and like these wars that they would do this, the American Revolution. And like how they get people to fucking agree with this, right? Because as an average soldier, you wouldn't get anything in terms of the spoils of war. And maybe you get into war and you kind of like it, you're a career soldier, but for everybody else, you're walking into these fucking bullets flying by you, and your friends are getting killed, and you get shot, and they have no efficient surgeons. So you take just a minor bullet wound and you're losing that part of your body, or organ failure and things. And so even if you don't die, it's even worse. You're suffering, you're maimed for the rest of your life, and in pain and like poor health, and your body's been fucked up by these bullet wounds. Like, they don't kill you, but you might be better off if you were dead, kind of thing. How do they get people to agree to do these things, right? I mean, when you see what war is like, I mean, just when you see it in a movie or something like that, never mind what it's like in real life, these war-torn places. How do they get fucking people to agree with these fucking wars, right? Things that they don't profit for at all. You win or lose the war, it doesn't really affect you in terms of, I mean, if you lose the war, it's even worse for you financially, depending on how all the settlement goes. But, you come back and your male population is depleted, and there's a workforce issue, and what do you receive in terms of material benefits from the war, right? Like, how do they get people to agree with doing this shit? And we're about to enter another one, and this one's going to be worse in terms of civilian casualties and the rest of it. So, it's just human beings are fucked. Anyways, let me wrap this one up. Let me end this on a happy note. Only spirituality will save this world. It's Paul Romano, definitely important for the apocalypse and the ascension. Everyone have a blessed day and be grateful.